Welcome to the final project. In the beginning of this unit, we talked about how Photoshop could be used for deepfaking. So now it's time we're going to make our own deepfake poster. It's going to be awesome. Are you ready to get started? So today in Photoshop, I'm going to create a Guardians of the Galaxy poster deepfake with Nick Cage. I'm going to combine the two greatest, most legendary characters of all time in one dynamic poster. Now, you do not have to do exactly what I do. This is for demonstration purposes only. You can copy what I'm doing, or you can create your own deepfake poster. I'm open to whatever cool things you've got going on. So I'm going to drag in my background, this Guardians of the Galaxy picture here, and I'm going to put Nick Cage's face right here. So I'm also going to bring in Nick Cage, but I'm not going to drag him into this comp right here. I'm actually going to open that file. I'll show you why in just a second. So I'll go File, Open, and then I'll bring in Nick Cage. Okay, so I've got Nick Cage here on a separate file because I'm going to use the neural filters to actually change the way he's looking so it matches here. Now again, I'm going to emphasize in Photoshop and in compositing in general, you're really paying attention to light, direction, which way he's facing. So it will help you out a ton. If you're not going to use these images, pick a picture for compositing that somewhat matches the picture you're putting it into, okay? It'll make it a lot easier. So I've got Nick Cage facing kind of one direction. I've got a nice high resolution image. This is a very large image. And I can switch his direction a little bit using neural filters. I can make him look a little bit younger. I don't have to do any of that, but I'm going to just for fun because it's fun for me. So let's get started. Let's go ahead and filter neural filters. You may or may not have Smart Portrait installed, but I'm going to turn that on. And I can change some things like expressions and globals, and I can play around with this. Kind of depends on how much fun I want to have, but really I just want to change his head direction. And I want to change his light direction. Okay, now he is facing this way to the right, and my boy Chris Pratt is facing to the left, but I can change that after I copy his head and move it over to this other comp. So with that, I'm not going to mess with his expression. You can obviously change any of this stuff, make him look younger or whatever. I mean, it's fun, go for it. Make him surprised or angry. Have fun with neural filters, they're super cool, super awesome. Sure, we could change his facial age to be younger. Okay, I'm not going to play around with Smart Portrait a lot, but I know you guys are going to love Smart Portrait. So anyway, I'm going to hit OK. I'm going to go over to my Object Selection tool. Going to select his face. Control-C to copy. Go over to my Guardians poster, Control-V to paste. And there we go. The first part is done. Okay, it's going to get crazy. We're going to use a lot of tools and techniques and brushes to make this look good. So try to keep pace with me. This is higher level stuff, so I'm not super worried if you get it perfect. It's really about learning how the process is done and thinking through how to do it well. So we've got him in here. What we need to do is change his direction. I'll move him over here. We want him to face that way. We're going to have to paint in some of these highlights and backlighting. First things first, we just want to go over overall shape. So we want his face to fit in here under this leather jacket quite nicely, and we want the scale to match, we want the direction to match. So we can really easily flip his direction by Control-T, by selecting him, hitting Control-T, and then we can right click and we can flip horizontal. That way he's facing the right direction. We'll go ahead and hit Enter, and now we need to scale him, so we probably shouldn't have hit Enter. So I'll Control-T again and we'll scale him down. What I like to do is change his opacity right here, so that I can kind of see eye size, and I'll zoom in here. What we want to do is somewhat match eye sizes. And we can even rotate his head a little bit to match. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect, but we're just getting it close. So I want it maybe a little bit bigger. I'll go ahead and change my opacity back up to kind of see what that looks like. We can always change that later, but once we start painting, it'll be harder to do. So it's important to get the step fairly close to right. I think we're going to be okay if we match it like that. Again, we could rotate it even a little bit more. I'll go ahead and hit Enter. Okay, so now if you just think through the process, we need to erase this suit, this beautiful suit on Nick Cage, and then we need to erase the beautiful face of Chris Pratt. So let's go ahead and remove the suit first. I'll go ahead and reposition him there. I'll zoom in. I could use the pen tool. It's pretty simple. I could use the eraser tool. I like the pen tool the best though, as you've probably noticed. Okay, so let's go ahead and delete his suit out of there. I'm going to use the pen tool. I'm going to make sure that I'm not on shape, but I'm on path, and I'm going to really quickly make a selection here. Doesn't have to be perfect. We can repaint stuff. In fact, we're going to be doing a lot of digital painting in this. Some of you will like digital painting and be really good at it. Some of you will hate it. Don't worry if you hate it. Go ahead and hit paths over here, right click, make selection, enter, hit delete, Control D to deselect. Okay, so we're that much closer to being done. All right, but of course we need to cut out the background. So let's go over to my layer panel, hide Nick, and let's go ahead and delete this beautiful face here. So we want to make a selection here. We could just use the eraser tool. There's lots of ways we could do this. It's kind of up to you. I want to make sure I get a very clean cut over here on this jacket. I don't want to destroy any of it. So that's why I'm using the pen tool. And then I want most of the blue sky back there. It's not insanely important. Like the blue sky with stars is really easy to paint out or repaint digitally. It's more detailed things like a face that become insanely hard. Now you can do it, and Photoshop masters are very good at that, but we don't have time in a tutorial to do that kind of level work, you know, painting a digital face. So let's go ahead and go to paths, work path. I will make a selection, hit enter, hit delete. Oh, we got to go over here and select this layer. We'll go ahead and hit delete. And of course we have a background, so it's going to try to fill it. So let's double click on this background here, hit OK. Then we can hit delete. Now we can turn Nick Cage back on. Okay. Hopefully you followed that. I'm going to Control D to deselect. I just wanted to delete the face. If you guys don't want to use the pen tool, you can just erase. And I had to change this layer. It was a background layer, so I had to double click on it. Otherwise it was just going to fill it. So now we've got his face there, and obviously we have to repaint this background. Pretty easy to do. And then we need to match the neckline to go right underneath this layer. What we could do is drag this down below, and then we can kind of see areas that we need to fix. All right, we could even raise him up a little bit here. Something like that. We may want to repaint his neck. Again, we're going to have to fix some of this stuff right here. All right, so a couple ways to do this. What we can do is we can leave him back there. I like to put him up front though, and then change the opacity and then cut out this shape perfectly. So let's go ahead and with Nick Cage selected, we'll cut this shape out again with the pen tool. So I'll go ahead and hit the pen tool, and we'll go ahead and just kind of trace over these lines, cut that neck just perfectly. Just using opacity to see kind of what we're doing. We'll want to cut this way. Again, I'm going to make that a selection, enter, delete, and it's going to delete that neck portion. And I'll Control D to deselect. And then let's take the opacity back up. We just need to repaint these missing stars right here. And so we can do that with the clone stamp tool. So let's select this background layer and let's just go ahead and name them real quick. And Nick face. All right, so with the background selected, let's go ahead and repaint that background. We can hide Nick and kind of do a better job. We can see what we're doing. So I'll go ahead and hit the S hotkey for the clone stamp tool. And let's go ahead and sample an area of space. Right click and change the brush size. And of course, I want to make sure my flow and opacity are up high here for this. And I'm just going to paint some of this in. Again, I go ahead and sample all over the place. That way it doesn't look like I'm kind of, it kind of helps make it look more seamless, if you will. And then check to see where you actually need to paint. We need to paint over here. Again, we need to be careful that we don't paint this edge. So a couple things I like to try to do is I actually copy this area and paste it over the background. Okay, so let me show you what I'm talking about. First, let's go ahead and finish painting all this. We don't need this jet right here. We could keep it there, but no one's going to notice that unless they've like created this poster themselves. So I'm not worried about keeping that. Again, try to sample from all over the place to kind of more realistically draw the sky out. That's why I keep clicking off and with the Alt key held down. And you've used this tool before, you'll get better at using it. On a deepfake like this, because we have a face in the foreground, we really don't have to worry about how great this looks, except for in this area right here. That's where we're going to kind of need it to look good. So I will get as close as I can. or I feel comfortable with. And then I'm going to use the marquee selection tool, select this whole area right here, Control C, make a new layer, Control V, and now I've got that on top. So now I'm not worried about cutting this or painting over this part of the jacket. So if I select the background here again, S for the clone stamp tool, now I can paint in the background right here. And no one will be any the wiser. Of course, let's hide that. We'll see we need to kind of zoom in here and erase this. Let's go ahead and select that layer, hit the E key, change the size by right-clicking, and change the hardness so I can get right up on this, right there. Okay, again, I'm moving pretty fast. I don't need any of this stuff, really. Just want the jacket to be over the background that we're painting in. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. I've got this little jacket area that's just creating a sharp edge here. And I can merge these two together again when I'm done, because it gets confusing. You start painting on one, and like if I start painting right here, I hit the S key, sample, and paint, nothing happens. Again, this is the most common Photoshop mistake, is you have the wrong layer selected or the wrong selection selected. So I will want to merge these again so it's easier to understand, but with this background selected, let's finish our task of painting out the background somewhat. Okay, now you can see I painted it out, but when you click on Nick Cage's face, it's harder to see. And then we just need to fix his neck, and that might take a little bit more work, but we can go ahead and fix his neck here in the next step. First, let's merge these two layers back together, this little fix and the background, so they're all one again. Oh, looks like we created a problem here. When did that happen? I don't even remember doing that. Don't worry, we can fix it, especially if I did this non-destructively. But did I do this non-destructively? No, I did not. So let's go over to the history brush over here. Hopefully you won't make this mistake. Select this right here, right click, change the size. I want to paint the history back in here where I kind of mess things up. Thankful for the history brush, okay? Cool. All right, so the history brush is important, believe it or not. Okay, so now I'll merge these two together. A lot of times when I'm talking fast in a tutorial, I kind of forget and I don't pay attention to detail and I make mistakes. So let's go ahead and merge these layers. And now we just have Nick Cage and this background. Now again, I know I'm moving fast and I'm not expecting as much detail or as complex of composites, but I want to show you how it's done for those of you who are really going to get into this. All right, so I need to paint his neck. It's not going to be super easy because I don't really have much to sample there. So a couple things I could do. I could try moving his face down. If I hit the V key, grab him and move him down, but then all that hard work is lost. So what I really want to do is try to paint it the best I can. Okay, we can try using the clone stamp tool, hit S, change the size by right clicking, sample up here and try to paint that. Like so, but it's not going to look good, is it? Now again, a lot of ways to solve this. The easiest way to solve it is if you have a sample area that works, but what I'm going to show you is kind of a fun little trick that we've used before. I'm trying to reuse tools you've used in the past to kind of make it easier. This may or may not work, but it's fun to try. So I'm going to select this layer and we're going to warp this jacket actually up. Let's try it. Let's see if it works. So let's go to Filter and Liquify. And I'm just going to change the size of this. Make sure that this smudge tool's on. Just going to warp this jacket up a little bit, like so. And hopefully we'll get away with it. Let's hit OK and see what that does for us. Okay, I didn't quite get it. Let's try that again. Filter. Liquify. This is just a creative way to get around the problem. Again, this is one of those things where when you're photoshopping for a long time, there's so many tools to use, and so many of the tools can be used to solve the same problem. You always don't know exactly which one to use. So there we go. I've solved the problem. I have this tiny little area now to fix, and I think I can fix it by hitting sample right there. But first, of course, I need to select Nick's face. I hit sample right here. I can come down here and just kind of draw that in. And then I'll go E for the eraser tool and delete it. Again, you won't notice it if you zoom out And that's just a creative way to solve the problem. Use the liquefy tool. No one's going to notice that you liquefied this. If you really push it far, people will notice. The key is subtlety. All right, so now we have this decent composite of the face. Everything shape-wise looks good. I mean, there's this tiny little area here that I made some kind of mistake. So let's go ahead and use the eraser brush, get in there, and see if we can't fix that. I'll change the size. Again, right-clicking to get the eraser brush size, and just painting whatever that mistake was out. Okay, something like that. Okay, so now overall the shape is done. So we've got shape done, and that may have seemed complex, but it was pretty simple tools. Really, we just used the neural filter to change its light direction and face direction. Then we just scaled it in the horizontal by Control T, right click, and flip horizontal. And then we just cut out shapes. It was literally just about cutting out shapes, using the clone stamp tool to paint the background, the warp tool to fix the neck because we didn't have any good neck areas to sample. So all tools that you've used before. Now we're going to get into something called digital painting, and we're going to paint kind of the highlights in. Now one thing I didn't do is I erased his face. So what I'm going to do is bring in reference, file, place embedded. It's important to keep this reference somewhere on our page because we need to see the light going on here. So I'm going to keep it down here while we do some digital painting. Notice we have these highlights and background light up. That's really going to add a lot of realism to this. And then we'll do a color correction where we add some blue into his face as a final touch. Again, I'm just showing you how it's done. This is not going to be perfect by any means. You can always spend more time on it, but we have limited time in class and in these tutorials. So how do we paint these highlights in? Let me show you. What we're going to do here is click Nick Cage's face. I'll hit enter. We'll keep this reference here. We can turn it off and on, but we need to see this. And to make it a little cleaner on me, I'm just going to rasterize the layer, hit the E key for the eraser, change the size by a lot, and just kind of clean up my canvas so I feel like I have kind of a clean workspace here. It's not important. It's just important that we have reference. Okay, so we're going to do some digital painting on Nick Cage's face. And we're gonna actually paint in these highlights. And it's actually going to look pretty good. So let's go ahead and make a new layer. We need to name it so it's pretty clear what we're looking at here. We're going to call this backlighting. And then what we're going to do is hit the I sample key for the sample tool right here. And we're going to get this kind of backlight color right here. Maybe you can drag it around and kind of get it. We want to get kind of that light blue. Not a complete white. I mean, it's more white over here. I'm not going to worry about that. You're not going to notice it. So sample one of these blues by the face. Then we're going to hit the B key for the brush tool. We're going to change the brush size. And it's really important then that we change our opacity and flow on the brush. I'm going to keep things way low. Remember I talked about in a previous tutorial, I think it was the last one, that slower is better when it comes to compositing. And again, I'm putting this on a separate layer so that we have non-destructive editing. We can always undo and repaint it. I don't want to paint right on his face. I want another layer called backlighting. We can always merge them later on, but I'm going to paint on this backlighting layer. But I want to change the mode from normal to color dodge right here. Now I can paint in some of these backlights. Okay? So what I want to do is add a lot of shine right here in his hair and even in the background around him. I'll zoom in for it, but you also want to keep this reference kind of visible. Don't want to paint out too much, and just kind of slowly do it and match whatever you see going on here. Now, I might want a little bit of a smaller brush for some of the finer details. You're going to try to kind of mirror the contours of his face. I probably have too much flow going on right now and a little bit too much opacity. I want this to be very slow, almost like a calming, soothing process where you slowly add the detail in. Pay close attention to where he has highlights, and that's all you're doing is painting in these highlights. And don't worry about getting it right and getting it perfect. Just try your best to mimic what you see going on over there. Again, they have different size faces, so it's going to look different. You're just trying to match light direction, and if you do a decent job, you will fool people. It's called a deepfake for a reason. Again, try your best to match those. And super bright up here in the hair. What I would do is just kind of a first pass for lightness, and then I'll go in and I'll add some finer detail. But all this is backlighting. It's to show that there's explosions and lasers going off in space behind him. And that's creating this kind of backlight effect on his face or head and hair. We want to brighten his ears up quite a bit here. Again, slow process, takes time, but worth the effort. Then I'm going to change the brush size here quite a bit, and I'm going to kind of paint in this lightness over here. Just kind of brighten this side of his face quite a bit, and then I'll change the brush size again, and we'll try to paint kind of finer details. So all this should be a bit brighter. Again, slower is way better. Again, undoing if I feel like I go too far, too fast, or whatever. So I'll change the size of the brush. What you can do is change the opacity quite a bit higher, and you can kind of do little high frequency stuff. So maybe like 1 pixel, and you go in and kind of just get a couple of pixels at a time, like just like individual hairs lit up. All right, you could even take them out into space. Don't go crazy with this, or people will notice it. It's just kind of finer detail. And keep in mind curlier hair and straighter hair, right? So that's important. But what I want to do is paint some white in here, like you see here, where it's almost pure white. I mean, it's got that blue tinge to it, because I've introduced a lot of green in here because of the color dodge. I'm just painting like those high frequency details in the hair. Spend as much or as little time on this as you want. It's just going to add that much level of realism. Okay. Then I'm going to change the size of my brush again. Take these back down and paint in kind of mid-level details. Even smaller brush size. What I want to do is kind of accentuate kind of his age, if you will, by drawing in highlights in different areas. Again, these are probably cranked too high because I'm moving too quickly and it doesn't look good. All right. The beauty is if it looks like I go too far, I can go in and erase slowly. So we're getting there. What we need is more contrast in this, because you see there's darker darks here on the face than we've got. And we could paint in darks, but it's going to be a lot harder than if we just kind of change our overall look. So let's go to Nick Cage here. Let's non-destructively do this. I'll duplicate his face. And let's change kind of some color correction and see what we can kind of get here. So I will go Image, Adjustments, and what I want to do is go to Curves. You get this little pop-up here, and I notice there's a lot more blue and green in here. So if I go to this channel here and go to blue, I can kind of just drag this up a little bit and you'll get more blue. And what it's doing is adding more blue into the face, matching the background a lot better. This one actually probably has more green in it than blue, but the blue is actually going to make it look more like he's supposed to be there. We could try messing with the green a little bit, see what we get. You want to be subtle here. It kind of gives that neon glow. I don't like that as much. It washes him out a little bit. So probably not going to mess with the green channel at all. I'll just keep with that blue channel kind of cranked there. And then I want to mess with the contrast a little bit. Let's try doing contrast. So Image, Adjustments, and we should have a brightness contrast. Take our contrast up a little bit, like that. Something like that. Okay. Now, it's important to look at it without the reference because the reference is perfect. So we want to kind of take that off and kind of look at what we've got here. And I think we're getting pretty close to a decent composite. We could spend a lot of time on this. We could digital paint all the shadows in and we'll get an even better effect. We could change this blending mode here a little bit. We could try doing kind of a darker one. Okay, we're just going to try to find one that works here. Let's go with overlay. It gives us a good sense of contrast there, and contrast is good. Okay, we could continue working this forever, but a couple things I really want to emphasize. One, you don't have to use the characters and images that I did. I would love to see what you guys come up with. It's always more fun to see what you guys are interested in and see your guys' wacky, crazy composites. Two, don't be too hard on yourself. It's very hard to do. In fact, let me point out a major error I made. So if we go over to our reference layer here and turn it on, you'll notice that right here, I cut out the kind of back of his jacket there, kind of the neck, all right? And I made it work. But the point is, you make mistakes during a composite, and when you just turn off the reference and show someone this image, they believe it because you spent enough time to kind of create a deepfake. Now, there are people who spend way more time on this and create a perfect deepfake, and they become great digital artists, okay? So don't worry if that's not you. It takes a lot of time to get it perfect, and nobody ever gets anything perfect, okay? So have fun with this assignment. Just have fun, and remember, you can always ask me any questions you might have. Save it to the cloud, post it in Moodle, and we'll show some of the best ones in class. All right, I'm the Taylor Sensei. It's been a pleasure teaching you guys. I hope you learned a lot, and I can't wait to see what you guys come up with.